I used to believe that family was sacred, that blood alone could shield you from betrayal. But the day my nephew, Ethan, looked me straight in the eyes and laughed after stealing every penny I'd saved for my future, I realized how wrong I was. It started on a quiet Tuesday morning. I remember the light coming through my kitchen window, soft, golden, peaceful. I'd just finished baking a loaf of bread, the kind my late husband Richard used to love. I was humming along to an old Frank Sinatra tune when the phone rang. Ethan's name flashed on the screen, and I smiled. He was my sister's son, charming, ambitious, and the only one who still visited me after Richard's death. I thought of him as my own. "Aunt Margaret," he said in that sweet voice of his, "I've got great news. I've been accepted into a business program in Chicago, but I need a little help to secure housing before classes start." I didn't even hesitate. "Of course, dear," I said. "How much do you need?" That conversation was the first domino to fall. Over the next few months, Ethan's calls grew more frequent and his requests larger. He talked about tuition delays, broken laptops, and urgent deposits. Each time, his voice carried that same mixture of desperation and affection. I never questioned it. I transferred the money without a second thought, believing I was helping him build a better life. Until the day the bank called. "Mrs. Whitaker," the manager said, carefully, "I just wanted to confirm, did you authorize the withdrawal of $80,000 last night?" My heart dropped. 80? What? I whispered. I hadn't touched my account in weeks. My hands trembled as I logged into my online banking, and what I saw made my stomach twist. The balance was nearly zero. Every cent I'd saved after Richard's death, our retirement fund, the money meant to fix the house, the emergency stash for medical bills. Gone. I called Ethan immediately. No answer. Then again, voicemail. By the time he finally picked up, my voice was shaking. "Ethan," I said, trying to stay calm, "the money is missing. Did you take it?" For a moment, silence. Then I heard him laugh. "Come on, Aunt Margaret, what are you gonna do? Call the cops? We're family." The words sliced through me. My knees nearly gave out. That laughter, careless, cruel, didn't belong to the boy I'd loved like a son. "I trusted you," I managed to whisper. "Well, maybe you shouldn't have trusted anyone so easily." Then he hung up. That night, I sat in the dark, staring at Richard's old photo on the mantel. His eyes seemed to ask me what I was going to do. I wanted to cry, to scream, to throw something, but instead, I just sat there, my mind racing through every memory, every favor, every dollar I'd given. And as I stared at that photo, something caught my eye. The corner of Richard's old briefcase, half hidden under a stack of papers by the fireplace. The same briefcase he'd kept locked even from me. For years after his death, I couldn't bring myself to open it. It felt too private, too sacred, the last remnant of his world as an accountant, full of secrets and numbers that never made sense to me. But that night, with the echo of Ethan's laughter still ringing in my ears, something inside me hardened. If I was going to lose everything, I'd do it fighting. I went to the fireplace, pulled the briefcase out, and brushed off the dust. The metal latch was still sealed tight. I fetched a small screwdriver and pried it open, my hands shaking the whole time. Inside, I didn't find papers or ledgers like I'd expected, just a single black folder labeled FBI Correspondence Confidential. My heart skipped a beat. Richard? FBI? What on earth was this? I hesitated, but curiosity won. As I opened the folder, a faint smell of old ink and leather filled the air. Inside were documents, letters stamped with the FBI seal, a few old photos, and a key taped to the back page. The letters were dated between 1989 and 1993. They talked about a financial investigation, offshore accounts, and a joint operation with informant R. Whitaker. My hands went cold. My husband, the quiet, mild-mannered accountant, had been working with the FBI? I flipped through the pages, my pulse quickening. There were handwritten notes, coded messages, and one final letter addressed directly to me. If you're reading this, Margaret, it means I couldn't tell you in time. There are things you don't know about our family, about Ethan's father, about the money I hid. Don't trust anyone until you find the second key. I gasped. The letter ended abruptly, signed simply R. I stared at the page, my mind spinning. What did Ethan's father, my own brother-in-law, have to do with this? Why would Richard warn me not to trust anyone? And most of all, what money had he hidden? That night, for the first time since Ethan's betrayal, I didn't cry. I made tea, sat by the window, and watched the moon cast pale light over the old briefcase. I wasn't just a grieving widow anymore. I was a woman with a mystery. And maybe, just maybe, a way to fight back.
Sleep didn't come that night. My mind was a storm. The sound of Ethan's cruel laughter, the missing money, and that folder with the FBI seal burned into my thoughts. I couldn't tell what frightened me more, the betrayal I'd just faced, or the secrets Richard had kept for decades. By dawn, I had decided one thing. If Richard left clues, I was going to follow them. I made myself a cup of coffee and spread everything from the briefcase on the table. The documents were yellowed, the ink slightly faded, but the stamps, bold red FBI marks, were unmistakable. My fingers trembled as I traced the embossed seal. My husband had always told me his work was just bookkeeping, but these letters told a different story. The last line of his note echoed in my head. Don't trust anyone until you find the second key. Second key? I looked at the tiny brass key taped to the back page. If there was a second one, where was the first? I turned the key over in my hand and realized it wasn't for a door. It was too small. Maybe a safety deposit box or a lock box. My pulse raced as I remembered the small storage trunk Richard used to keep in the attic, the one he'd told me wasn't important. I climbed up the narrow attic stairs, the air thick with dust and old memories. Sunlight leaked through the small round window, illuminating a stack of forgotten boxes. I found the trunk tucked behind old Christmas decorations and a faded photo album from our honeymoon. The trunk had a tiny lock. I slipped the brass key into it, and it turned with a soft click. Inside was another folder, thicker this time, and an envelope marked "For Margaret, only if everything falls apart." Everything inside me froze. I sat down right there on the attic floor and opened it. Richard's handwriting filled the first page. If you're reading this, then I know something terrible has happened. Years ago, I helped the FBI expose a financial laundering network, and your brother-in-law, Peter, was part of it. I tried to protect you, Margaret, but I think Ethan might have learned the truth after Peter's death. The money he stole from you, it's not just your savings, it's connected to what I hid from the investigation. I felt my throat tighten. Peter? Ethan's father? My brother-in-law? The man I'd shared Christmas dinners with and trusted with my husband's business after his stroke? I read on, my heart pounding. There's an account under your name in a bank you've never visited. It holds everything I recovered. Funds I turned over as evidence, but later protected when I realized the corruption ran deeper than we thought. The FBI agent I worked with, Agent Keller, will know what to do. Don't tell anyone. Don't call the police. If anyone comes asking about me or the briefcase, go to the address below. The letter ended with an address, a small-town field office in D.C. I sat there, frozen. I wanted to deny it, to believe this was just Richard's paranoia. But Ethan's theft suddenly looked different. What if he hadn't just stolen from me? What if he'd stolen evidence tied to an old FBI case? Downstairs, my phone buzzed. A new message from an unknown number. You shouldn't have opened that briefcase, Aunt Margaret. Some things are better left buried. My blood ran cold. I knew that tone. Ethan. He knew. I quickly deleted the message and unplugged my internet router. The fear creeping up my spine was like ice water. He wasn't just greedy. He was dangerous. And he wasn't acting alone. I went straight to the bank Richard mentioned. The teller looked puzzled when I handed her the small key and my ID. After checking her system, her face changed. Mrs. Whitaker, please wait here a moment. She disappeared into a back room. A few minutes later, a tall man in a dark suit appeared, his badge glinting under the fluorescent lights. Mrs. Margaret Whitaker? He asked gently. I'm Special Agent Keller. We've been expecting this key for a long time. I blinked. Expecting me? What are you talking about? He nodded towards a private office. Your husband left instructions in the event someone accessed that box. Why don't we talk inside? I followed him in silence. My heart pounded so loudly it drowned out the sound of my own footsteps. Once the door closed, Agent Keller opened a file on his tablet. Your husband, Richard Whitaker, was part of a covert investigation into a major money laundering ring that involved offshore accounts, shell companies, and several prominent figures, including your late brother-in-law. I stared at him, speechless. Keller continued. Before his death, Richard turned over most of the evidence, but one key piece went missing. We've been trying to recover it for years. And Ethan, my nephew? He sighed. We believe he recently accessed an inactive account connected to the same network. That's how your life savings vanished. It's very possible he was trying to recover something his father once hid, something your husband was protecting. I felt dizzy. So Ethan didn't just steal from me out of greed? He maybe not, but that doesn't make him innocent. If he's handling stolen federal property, we need to bring him in. He slid a document toward me, a formal statement to sign. If you're willing, we'll open an investigation under your name as the primary witness. I stared at the pen, thinking about Ethan's words. What are you gonna do? I could almost hear Richard's voice whispering, Now you know what to do, Margaret. I signed my name. The agent smiled softly. You just did the right thing. Now, let's bring your nephew in. As I walked out of that office, I felt something I hadn't in months. Strength. The kind Richard had always said I carried quietly. I wasn't just a grieving widow anymore. I was part of a story that wasn't over yet. And Ethan, he had no idea what was coming next.
By the time I got home from the FBI office, the world looked different. The same quiet street, the same creaky porch swing, yet everything felt heavier, darker. I'd spent years believing my husband was just an ordinary accountant. Now I knew he'd been living a double life, an informant, entangled in a federal case that had never really ended. And now, somehow, I was part of it. That evening, I locked every door, shut the curtains, and sat by the phone. Agent Keller had told me not to contact Ethan, not even to provoke him. "Let us handle it," he had said. But the motherly part of me, the part that once baked cookies for that boy and watched him grow up, couldn't stay quiet. I wanted to understand why. Around midnight, my phone buzzed again. Another message. "Nice try, Aunt Margaret. You think running to the feds will save you? You're in this too." The room spun. My breath caught in my throat. How did he know? The FBI meeting had been confidential, or so I thought. I checked the windows, the driveway, the porch. The night was still. Too still. I picked up the phone, my hands trembling, and typed, "Ethan, please, you've already taken enough. What are you doing?" He replied instantly, "Finishing what my father started." I froze. My brother-in-law, Peter, had been dead for years, but Richard's letter had warned me that Peter was part of something dangerous. I stared at Ethan's words, the implications sinking in. Whatever Peter had started, Ethan was now trying to complete it. I called Agent Keller immediately. He answered on the first ring. "Mrs. Whitaker, we've been monitoring his digital activity. He's moving money through encrypted accounts overseas, but it's not just about your savings. He's trying to unlock a dormant fund tied to your husband's old investigation. That money is evidence." I swallowed hard. So my savings wasn't random. He knew your accounts were connected to your husband's. You were the key, Margaret, literally. That realization hit like a punch. The reason he targeted me wasn't just greed. It was strategy. I was part of the trail his father had left behind, and Ethan had used my love to unlock it. Keller's tone softened. "We'll trace him. Just stay put. Don't open the door to anyone. If he contacts you again, tell us immediately." But fear does strange things to a person. It makes you reckless. And the next morning, when I saw a familiar car parked down the street, Ethan's car, I didn't call the FBI. I walked right outside. He stepped out, wearing sunglasses and that same smug grin that had haunted me since the day he laughed on the phone. "You look good, Aunt Margaret," he said casually. "Did the feds tell you who your husband really was?" I folded my arms. "They told me enough. Enough to know you're over your head." He chuckled. "Oh, they didn't tell you everything then." Something in his tone chilled me. He leaned closer. "Richard wasn't a hero, Aunt Margaret. He wasn't protecting you. He was protecting himself. You think the FBI were the good guys? They used him, and he used you." I shook my head. "You're lying." He smirked. "Am I? Ask Agent Keller about Operation Ledger. Ask him why there's a sealed file with your name on it." I froze. "My name?" He grinned wider. "Yeah. Turns out you're more involved than you think." Before I could respond, a black SUV screeched to a stop at the curb. 2 FBI agents jumped out, weapons drawn. "Ethan Price, step away from the woman." Ethan's grin faltered for a split second, then he bolted. He ran toward his car, but one of the agents tackled him hard against the pavement. I stood there shaking, my pulse racing, as they cuffed him. Agent Keller emerged from the SUV, his expression grim but calm. "You shouldn't have come outside," he said quietly. I swallowed, my voice barely steady. "He said my name is in some file, Operation Ledger. What does that mean?" Keller hesitated. "We'll talk about that later. For now, he's in custody. That's what matters." But that pause, that flicker in his eyes, told me there was more. They drove Ethan away, and I went back inside, feeling the weight of years pressing down on me. I thought it was over, that justice had been served. But the more I thought about Keller's hesitation, the more I realized this wasn't finished. Later that night, I sat by the fireplace again, Richard's briefcase at my feet. I went through every paper, every photo, searching for answers. Then I found something I'd missed before, a small envelope wedged beneath the lining. Inside was a photograph. It showed Richard shaking hands with a man whose face was half hidden, but I recognized the badge on his lapel, FBI. And scrawled on the back in Richard's handwriting were 5 words that made my blood run cold. Trust no one. Not Keller either.
I sat back, trembling. My husband had been warning me not just about criminals, but about the FBI themselves. My phone buzzed again, this time from an unknown number. No message, just an image. A blurred photo of me sitting by my window, taken from outside. Someone was watching me. And suddenly, I understood. Ethan wasn't the end of this story. He was just the beginning. The night after Ethan's arrest, I couldn't sleep. Every sound in the house felt amplified. The ticking clock, the wind pressing against the old window panes, even my heartbeat echoing in my ears. That photograph haunted me. Richard's scrawled warning, "Trust no one," not Keller either, burned into my mind like a brand. What had he known? And what did the FBI really want from me? By morning, I decided I couldn't sit still any longer. I called Agent Keller's office, but the line went straight to voicemail. Then I called again. Nothing. That uneasy silence told me more than words ever could. Something was off. So I did what Richard had always done when he smelled a lie. I started digging. I searched through our old home files, the storage boxes in the attic, even the encrypted drive I'd found tucked behind a loose floorboard years ago, one Richard told me to never touch. But now I had to. It took me an hour to figure out the password, a combination of our anniversary date and the word ledger. When the drive finally opened, my stomach dropped. Hundreds of files appeared. FBI reports, bank transactions, hidden audio recordings, and in the middle of it all, one folder titled Operation Ledger, Confidential. I clicked it open. The first file was a transcript, an internal memo between two agents. My husband's name appeared several times, but what caught my attention was a single paragraph highlighted in red. Asset Whitaker, Richard, compromised. Wife suspected of knowledge. Proceed with quiet surveillance. No direct contact authorized. My breath caught. Wife suspected of knowledge. They'd been watching me for years, even before Richard's death. The next file was worse. It was an audio log, a meeting between Richard and Keller himself. I hit play. Richard's voice. "I've done everything you asked, Keller. I got the files. I transferred the money. Now let us go." Keller. "It's not that simple. The money isn't clean. If it's traced, we're both finished." Richard. "You said this was for the Bureau." Keller. "It was, until the Bureau shut the case. Now it's survival, Rick, and if you don't keep quiet, you'll take your wife down with you." I froze. Keller, the man who promised to protect me, was the same man who'd blackmail my husband? And that evidence fund Ethan had been chasing? It wasn't an official account. It was dirty money, laundered through fake investigations. Richard must have discovered it and tried to back out, but Keller couldn't let him. He needed someone to take the fall. That someone was my husband. I sat there for hours, my world unraveling piece by piece. Everything I'd believed, every comforting word from Keller, every official letter, it was all built on lies. Then my phone rang. No caller ID. My hand trembled as I answered. "Margaret," Keller's voice said, low and tense, "we need to talk, now." I didn't respond. He continued, "Don't do anything stupid. Don't open any files. Don't go to the media. Just meet me. Tonight." I stayed silent, trying to steady my voice. "You used my husband. You used me," I finally said. A pause. Then quietly, "It's not what you think." "Then tell me the truth, Keller. Who's really behind Operation Ledger?" Another pause. Longer this time. "If you want to live, Margaret, don't ask that question on the phone." The line went dead. I stood there shaking, the silence deafening. My instinct screamed at me not to meet him, but I also knew he wouldn't stop until he got those files back. That evening, I drove to an old diner on the edge of town, the same place where Richard and I used to stop during road trips. I parked under a flickering streetlight and waited. Minutes later, Keller arrived. No suit, no badge, just a worn jacket and tired eyes. He slid into the booth across from me, glancing nervously toward the window. "You shouldn't have opened that drive," he said quietly. "You shouldn't have lied to me," I shot back. He sighed. "Richard wasn't innocent, Margaret. He was playing both sides. He wanted out, but he knew too much. If the Bureau found out what he did, they'd have buried him. So he made me his deal." I leaned forward. "And me? Was I just another piece on the board?" He looked away. "He thought hiding the files through you would protect you, but that made you the last loose end." My chest tightened. "So Ethan, he found out about the fund from his father. Peter was part of it too. The ledger wasn't about money, Margaret. It was about names. Corrupt agents, politicians, everyone tied to that account. And now Ethan has access to it? Not anymore, but others do. You need to leave town. Tonight." I shook my head. "I'm not running, Keller. Not again." He looked at me then. Truly looked at me, as if weighing whether I was brave or foolish. "You think you can fight them? You don't even know who they are." Before I could answer, a car screeched outside. Keller's eyes darted to the window. "Get down!" Glass shattered. Bullets tore through the diner's front windows. Keller pushed me to the floor, pulling his gun. "Stay down," he shouted, returning fire through the broken glass. I crawled toward the counter, heart pounding, as headlights sped away into the darkness. When the gunfire stopped, the diner was a mess. Shattered glass, overturned chairs, smoke lingering in the air. Keller was bleeding from his arm, but still breathing. "They found you," he muttered, voice strained. "They're cleaning house." I grabbed his phone, pressed it into his hand. "Who are they, Keller? Who's really behind this?" He met my eyes, pain flickering through his face. "Not the Bureau," he whispered. "Bigger." Then, before I could ask more, he passed out. Sirens wailed in the distance. I stood there, shaking, staring at the blood on my hands, realizing that I was no longer a victim in someone else's story. I was now the only one left who knew the truth. And somewhere out there, the people Richard tried to expose were still watching, still waiting. I looked out at the night sky and made a silent vow. "You took my husband. You used my nephew. You tried to silence me, but I will finish what Richard started." For the first time in years, I didn't feel afraid. I felt ready. The next morning, I woke to the sound of distant thunder. Or maybe it was just the echo of last night still rattling in my head. Keller was gone when I checked the hospital later that day. No discharge, no record. It was as if he'd vanished into thin air. That's when I knew I couldn't trust anyone in the system anymore. The only way to finish this was to do what Richard once did best, expose the truth from the shadows. I gathered everything, the encrypted drive, Keller's phone, and Richard's old briefcase, and drove straight to the one place I swore I'd never go back to, his old office, still sealed after his death. It was eerie stepping into that space again. Dust blanketed his desk, the calendar still frozen on the date he died. But hidden behind a false drawer was what I was looking for, a small metal safe. I used his birthday. It clicked open. Inside were two things, a USB drive labeled Contingency and a letter addressed to me. My hands trembled as I unfolded the paper. If you're reading this, Maggie, it means they came for me. Don't trust Keller. He's deep in it. The files I've hidden aren't just evidence. They're leverage. People higher up, names you wouldn't believe. Senators, CEOs, bureau brass. They run everything through Ledger. Take this drive to Agent Ruiz in D.C. She's clean. She knows what Ledger really is. She'll protect you. And tell Ethan, I'm sorry for the mess I left him in. I love you. Always. Richard. I sat there, tears spilling onto the letter. All those years I thought he'd been a traitor, but he'd been trying to save us. I packed the drive, tucked the letter close to my chest, and hit the road before sunrise. Every mile felt heavier, every shadow on the highway like a ghost of the past following close behind. By the time I reached Washington, I hadn't slept in 2 days. My nerves were fire, but my purpose had never been clearer. When I finally met Agent Ruiz, she wasn't what I expected. Young, sharp-eyed, and calm. She led me to a quiet conference room in an anonymous government building, closed the door, and said simply, "Mrs. Whitaker, we've been expecting you." I froze. Expecting me? She nodded. Keller called before he disappeared, said if anything happened to him, you'd come. He said you have the ledger files. I hesitated, unsure whether to trust her. Why would Keller help me? He's part of it. She sighed, sitting across from me. He was, but something changed. He gave us enough to start tracing the real players. The files you have, they're the last piece. I slid the USB across the table. Then finish it, I said. Ruiz plugged it in, and line after line of data filled the screen. Transaction trails, false identities, and documents stamped with official seals. At the top of the list was one name that made her flinch. "Senator Harlow," she whispered. "He's been untouchable for 20 years. I leaned back. Not anymore. She looked at me then, eyes hardening with resolve. "You just brought down half of Washington, Mrs. Whitaker." For a moment, I couldn't breathe. Everything Richard had fought for, every sleepless night, every secret, it was finally out. But I also knew it wasn't over. A few days later, the news broke. Massive corruption ring exposed in Washington. FBI agents, lawmakers under investigation. Richard's name was finally cleared. Keller's body was later found near the Potomac. No wallet, no phone. Ruiz said it was cleanup work. And Ethan, he was released. Turns out, the money he'd taken had been bait, planted to make him look guilty. The Bureau issued an official apology, but no words could undo what that year had cost him. He came to see me a week later. We sat on the porch, just like we used to, the sun setting in a sky that finally felt calm. He said, "I thought you hated me." I replied, "I thought you betrayed me." We both smiled through the pain. He said, "I'm proud of you, Grandma. You did what no one else could." I reached for his hand. "No, Ethan, I just did what your grandfather started." For a while, we sat in silence. The cicadas hummed, the air warm and golden. Then Ethan asked softly, "What now?" I looked out over the fading light. Now, we rebuild, and we remember that truth has a cost, but silence costs even more. Later that night, as I closed the house for bed, I noticed something on the table by the window, an envelope with no return address. My heart skipped. I tore it open. Inside was a single photograph. Me, Ethan, and Richard, taken years ago, on our last family picnic. On the back, written in familiar handwriting, were just 3 words. "It's over now." I didn't know if Keller had left it, or if someone wanted me to believe he did. But for the first time in decades, I didn't feel hunted. I felt free. As I placed the photo in my journal, I whispered to Richard's memory, "We won, my love." The storm had passed, and even though the world would keep its secrets, I finally had peace and the truth.